Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us for tonight's conversation with Nicole and Erica. Nicole is the co-founder of Precious Dreams Foundation, and Erica is the program director at Friends of the Children. And we're really happy to have them here to not celebrate, of course, but talk about foster care because it is Foster Care Awareness Month. And yeah, my name is Tara. I work with the Whitaker group and be social on the community end of things. So we'll go ahead and get started. Nicole and Erica, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourselves?
Yeah, I'll just jump in and go first. Tara, thank you for having me. So, as you mentioned, I'm the co founder and executive director of the Precious Dreams Foundation. It's an organization that I started with my mother in 2012. We're based here in New York City, but we have local chapters all across the states. We are an organization that provides comfort items specifically for bedtime for children in foster care, as well as those experiencing homelessness. And we have programming that empowers young people to learn how to self comfort and focus on their dreams. We work closely with our most vulnerable youth, those that we highly believe have the power to change the trajectory of their lives if only given the tools. So that is something that we are extremely passionate about and working towards only expanding in more cities as we look to expand to Houston next month and Atlanta the following.
And hello, my name is Erica Reid. I am one of the National Directors of Programs for Friends of the Children. Our organization, I've been with the organization for 3 years now. What we do is actually support children and families across the nation. We have approximately 24 sites that we work with at this time. What we do is provide paid long-term professional mentors, also known as friends, and each friend serves 8 youth for 4 hours a week. So their time is split not only in the classroom setting, but also in the child's community and in their home, working with them one-on-one. And we actually have goals that we work on with our youth, what we call roadmap plans that make sure that we are very intentional with our work with our families. And so the organization was founded in 1993 by Duncan Campbell in Portland, Oregon. We started with 3 friends and 24 youth, and we have now expanded, as I mentioned, across the nation, which is really exciting. And I'm happy to be here and looking forward to our conversation tonight.
Thank you so much for taking the time to tell us more in detail about the work that you're doing. Nicole, Precious Dreams, it's a sort of newer foundation. What inspired you to create this program?
That's a great question. So I was actually inspired by my sister who came to live with our family when she was 4. And so when my sister joined our family, she suffered from nightmares 7 nights a week. And it is because of the trauma that she experienced in both experiencing physical and mental abuse for many years. And so no matter how much therapy or support was provided during the day, no matter what environment she was in, at bedtime, when she would lie awake at night, she was haunted with those memories. And there was nothing that we could do about that. You know, we couldn't control those emotions that she felt and the thoughts that came back at bedtime. So we started introducing comfort items to her at age 4, something that most parents provide to their children when they first come home from the hospital, whether that is a blanket or a plush item. Most parents teach their children how to self-soothe immediately. But in the foster care system, there's so much support that's needed that bedtime support and comfort items can most times be an afterthought. And so at age 4, my sister had no idea what pajamas were. The concept of putting on new clothes to go to bed or clean clothes to go to bed made no sense to her at all. So we started introducing the comfort items, and we just saw what a difference it made, whether it was reading to her at bedtime or, filling up the bed with plush items. She would wake up from a night terror and just hold on to those things or cry with those things until she could get back to sleep. And it really made a difference. And I would say it was like around 2010, 2011 was the first time I started asking, what type of support is being provided within the foster care system for youth that are not in a home, that are living still in a group setting, that are awaiting to live with a family. What happens to them when they have nightmares? Who is there to support them? And here in New York City, I was able to go in and take a tour with ACS, and I learned that there are security guards on site. And if a child is having a bedtime terror, there is no comfort being provided. The child must stay in bed and get themselves back to sleep. And that really broke my heart. Just the thought that a child at 3, 4, 5, or 10 years old is crying themselves to bed at night. And so it started as a passion project of me just wanting to assemble some comfort bags and figure out how I can get friends, not only in New York, but across the nation, to start providing comfort items so that as kids are taken into care, they'll be greeted with a comfort bag. It started there, and then I quickly realized how much help this system needs. And, beyond the comfort items, we had to start introducing programming to not only support our young people, but our teenagers and our young adults who are transitioning out of foster care, to teach them, the work that most adults start doing in their 20s, which is self-care. Our young people need to start doing that at a very young age. So we started introducing yoga and meditation and journaling. And, we're still doing that to this day. And in every way possible, we're just trying to show young people not just how to get through the night, but how to feel good at bedtime when they are alone, so that they can focus on their dreams and focus on a better tomorrow. So it all started with my sister, Miracle, who's now 16. But we've come a long way since learning about her experience and then jumping into action.
Does she work with Precious Dreams in any capacity?
She volunteers as much as she possibly can. Yeah, she's already asked if she could have a job, but I want her to go out and explore, all of her passions and then figure out what she wants to do. So
that's amazing. How important is it for children in the foster care system and in homeless shelters? Why something as simple as comfort, like things we take for granted, and the ability to self-soothe and take care of self. Why is that more important for children working within the system?
Well, for one, sleep is crucial for brain development. A lot of children in foster care deal with mental health issues because of the trauma that they have experienced. 1 in 4 children in the foster care system will be diagnosed with ADHD. And as an adult with ADHD, I know that you need sleep in order to function, in order to get through school, in order to deal with all of the uncertainty that comes with shuffling through the system. So sleep is one part of it. But ultimately it's supporting their well-being and their mental health, because what we want, our biggest objective, is to show our young people how to choose options that will lead to healthy outcomes. And a lot of times when they're having bad days, or, when they're feeling stress and dealing with adversity, sometimes it's very easy to turn to, negative coping items or drugs or, negative people. And so we're trying to show them at a very young age what leaning on healthy options can do and how it can ultimately support you and make for a better future.
Erica, can you speak to how your work with Friends of the Children kind of aligns with Nicole's work, especially with regard to mentorship and just being a consistent present in these kids' lives?
Absolutely. Nicole, you actually hit on some really good points. Just a second ago, you talked about outcomes and how important it is that you're working with youth. And some of the things that we do with our professional mentors, I mentioned earlier that we have what we call roadmap plans that we work on with our youth. And so there's 5 goals that we work on with our youth, including school success, pro-social development, improved health, making good choices, and plans and skills for the future. And so you were talking about, avoiding risky behavior and things like that, and keeping themselves occupied and keeping their minds focused. And that is so important to the core of the work that we do. And you also talked about self-regulation and being able to calm and self-soothe. We have what we call core assets. We have 9 core assets that we teach our youth, and one of them being self-management, right? And some others that are really important for youth that are experiencing foster care or who are in the child welfare system, like hope and belonging. Those are 2 things that we really want our youth to experience and feel, and have that sense of community, which is really important. So our mentors are paired with our youth. Approximately 8 youth are on their roster. They work with them for 4 hours a week, as I mentioned earlier. But we as a program actually commit to these families for 12 plus years. And that's significant. There's not a lot of organizations who have a voluntary program, a free voluntary program for families to participate in and actually have that consistent caring adult in a child's life for that length of time. And we really believe by taking mentorship out of the volunteer realm and actually making it a paid position really provides that consistency, that quality that children in care really, really need. By just having that person around for the long haul and really sticking by them with those milestones that we're hoping that they achieve.
That's amazing. Erica, can you speak more to, just because this is sort of a primary focus in terms of the way we are talking about foster care awareness, and there are some pretty clear racial disparities. So how can the work that both of you are doing curb that racial disparity? Which I know is kind of like a broad question, right? So feel free to answer however you're comfortable.
No, you're absolutely right, Tara. Youth of color, particularly Black youth, are 15% more likely to experience foster care than their white counterparts, but they're least likely to receive the in-home family preservation services that many families receive, which is already a disparity. And what we do with Friends of the Children, and I'm sure Nicole can attest to this, is really important that community organizations really stand behind those families and really support them and advocate in many different settings. So what we do is actually work with community leaders. We work in conjunction with the child welfare system to make sure that we're identifying families who need us the most or who could benefit most from our services. So we have something what we call a 2-gen approach. So obviously we are a child-centered, youth-focused organization, but we realize that there's an entire community behind this youth and a family who is in need of services, whether it's housing, whether it's securing a job, whether it's obtaining their own GED and high school diploma and things like that. And so we really try to wrap around the entire family to make sure that we're achieving those positive outcomes. Our youth who do enroll in the program are more likely to graduate high school, least likely to experience early parenting. They're more likely to do what we call the 3 E's. So enrollment into post-secondary education, enlistment into one of the armed services, or employment. So finding, joining the workforce right after high school, and also reduction in juvenile justice system. So all of those things are really, really important for our work. And as I mentioned, we've been doing this for nearly 30 years, and we have that research to back up what we're doing. And so we know that it's working.
Sorry, Nicole, did you want to speak to that at all? I know what you do is very different from from Friends of the Children, but I did just want to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, definitely. I agree with everything that Erica just said. I mean, it's all about investing in Black families, and I would say it's about investing in Black children. Whether or not they are in the foster care system, you have to just think about preventing children families from being separated, which is the biggest issue. I live in New York, where Black children make up 15% of the population, but they make up 57% of the population in foster care in New York, which shows that it is a huge systemic issue. And I think with everything that is happening right now around social justice, people in America are starting to finally realize that being Black in America, it has its disadvantages. Being Black in America and being in the foster care system makes navigating life extremely difficult. So we need to be investing in our Black communities. We need to be investing in families, whether it is work opportunities, housing, programming, mental health resources, doing everything that we can to prevent even some of those mental health issues from coming into play, because that is another reason why so many families get separated, which isn't talked about enough. But being Black in America takes such a toll on mothers that a lot of times they are unable to care for their kids. And you think about one of the main reasons why children are separated from their families is because of neglect. And neglect can look like a mother working 2 to 3 jobs to put food on the table. But if that is her only option, that is why she is not home. And because she is not home, that is why her children get taken out of the house. So there's so many issues. But at the end of the day, I think, advocacy is the number one thing that we try to do at Precious Dreams Foundation, is making people aware of these issues. Our Black children's issues are our issues. They're everyone's issues, because they're going to all impact the way that we see and live in life. But at the end of the day, we all have the power to invest in these communities that will ultimately lead in lower numbers of Black children shuffling through this very broken system.
Nicole, you made so many amazing points, especially down to supporting Black children, whether they're in the system or not. And I think when we have so many conversations around race and social justice, like, often children are not at the forefront of these conversations, and they should be. And I always think about Ma'Khia Bryant and how ultimately that horrible tragedy happened to her because the system failed her. She wanted to be with her family wanted to be with her. So yeah, I just think to unnecessarily remove children from their kids, or rather from their families, and the cycle of them winding up in placement and in unsafe environments, or environments where they're not being adequately cared for, because there are certain expectations of foster parents to still maintain a job, and they can't always be present in the household. It's just a lot. It's a very flawed system. So I appreciate you making the point of how important advocacy and community both are. So how can we as an audience advocate for children of color? What can we do?
So I can point out a few things. One thing that I'm the leader of an organization, but I believe in just being completely honest with everyone. And when you think about donating, I always tell people, don't just donate to Precious Dreams because I'm telling you to. I tell people there are so many issues within the foster care system. Find the organization that is addressing the issue that matters most to you, whether it is housing insecurity, food insecurity, mentorship, whatever it is. There are so many organizations that are currently doing the work. A great organization is CASA. So there are CASA programs in 49 states, I believe. And volunteers can sign up to be court-appointed advocates for children. So they help the court see the full picture of the child's life, so that the child ends up in a better situation. That is something that anyone can do. You can apply for at CASA, I think it's casanational.org might be their website, but you can just Google it. You'll find CASA. I would always say donations. So give whenever possible, if possible, to any organization that is doing the work. Volunteering time, as Erica was saying, mentorship is needed. At Precious Dreams Foundation, we also have a program called the Humble Dreams Initiative, where we have a cohort program with youth that are trying to exit the shelter system or those who are aging out of foster care. And we pair them up with mentors that are working within their fields of interest. So mentorship is so important, but I would say volunteering, donating, mentoring, or even just signing up to advocate and be a voice for a child, to take the time out of your day to go to court and make that appearance, could ultimately change a child's fate. And that is a way that anybody can show up.
And if it's okay, Tara, may I piggyback on what
Yeah,
Nicole
please.
just shared? Definitely Guardians Ad Litem or CASA is definitely a way to advocate or volunteer your time. Becoming a foster parent, eventually adoption if that's your calling, but then also considering what we call respite care. So if you don't want to like dive deep into being foster or an adoptive parent, there are opportunities where you can step in and allow someone to just have a weekend to themselves or reprogram or step back for a moment. And so that is also an opportunity. Another way that community leaders and community members can support families is also just providing opportunities to build resilience within our families and our youth. Our CEO for Friends of the Children, Terry Sorensen, has often said, we must be relentless in order for them to be resilient. And I believe that that's powerful. So we have to really make sure that we step up, that we assist whenever needed by giving families concrete supports when they need it around housing, or they may need pots and pans. I mean, it can be something as simple as that. But then also creating connections for families. A lot of times they feel alone or isolated, especially in these COVID times. They may not realize that so many others are experiencing different pressures. And you definitely do, whatever possible, we do want to avoid becoming a part of the child welfare system. So if a parent is feeling frustrated and need parenting support and learning how to respond to their children when they behave in another way, it's really important for us to kind of provide those opportunities for them where barriers are not an issue. So providing transportation vouchers if needed, or giving those free parenting classes and things like that, I think can be ways that we as community members can step in.
Thank you so much for all of that. That was a lot, but I did take some notes. Chantel had a good question. She asked if you could both speak to some of the myths and, is foster care all bad?
So I'll just jump in and say, no, foster care is not all bad. Foster care saves lives for many children. But every child's experience in the system is different. And there are many holes within the system, and cracks that our children can fall in depending on whether or not they have a great social worker that makes them feel comfortable enough to share their honest experience. I was actually just talking to some teen girls yesterday that are navigating the system, and one shared that she is afraid to tell her social worker what's actually happening in the home because she's afraid she'll go to a worse place. And we have to empower our young people that I always empower them that whether or not you are in foster care or you are in a home with your biological parents, as children, you must advocate for yourselves. You could be at harm anywhere, in the foster care system, at home, at school, at work, anywhere. So young people need to be shown and taught that they can advocate for themselves wherever they are so that they can get out of a situation, because there will be foster care placements that are not healthy, that are not in their best interest, or sometimes the values of one family just doesn't align with the values that that child was brought up around. There aren't enough Black families that are fostering children. So there are many white families that are taking in Black kids, and a child might act out because they don't like the food. There might not be the flavor of the food that they're used to. They might not like the way that they're spoken to. And so that can create conflict in the home. So there's so many issues that can happen that really have nothing to do with, foster care as a whole. It's just that single situation. So I would say no, foster care is not bad. I know plenty of families, healthy families that provide great homes for children and great outcomes for children. But of course, there's always going to be some good with bad. And I think that is why it is so important to empower our Black children so that they know when they step into a home that is not safe, that they can go and speak up. And if their social worker doesn't do something about it, they need to ask for their social worker's manager. They need to get online. They need to call emergency hotlines and get the support so that they can get removed.
Yeah, and Nicole, and another myth too is that I'm not qualified to be a foster parent, right?
That's what I thought.
A lot of times people say, oh, I have to have a dual income home. I have to be married. I have to have no children in a home and things like that. And that is a myth. That is not true. You can be single. You can have children of your own in the home. It's a number of ways that you can find out how you can actually become a foster parent yourself. And also sometimes another myth is that the youth are quote unquote challenging whenever you bring them into your home. And as Nicole said, of course, there are going to be some ups and downs and some rockiness there. But there's something that's called therapeutic foster care, and then there's not. And so, just being mindful of the different types of foster homes that you can apply for, or just familiarize yourself with the different levels of care.
I certainly thought I'm, for all intents and purposes, a single mom, but I'm very interested in foster care and adoption. But I thought that it was something that just wasn't possible for me, which I think we might have spoke about prior to tonight. So now I'm aware that there is a possibility I could foster or get involved in some capacity. But what are some of the hurdles that exist for Black families, and why aren't more Black families fostering children or thinking more long-term and adopting children?
I believe because we're experiencing a lot of trauma ourselves, a lot of systemic oppression ourselves, that we're trying to navigate those things on a daily basis. So maybe we're trying to take care of home first before we try to bring in someone else into our homes, which may be one of the reasons why we do not have as many families of color fostering. But I encourage us to do that, and especially considering it for our older boys. Older Black boys are least likely to be fostered, or and they're really victims of the system, and people sometimes do not feel comfortable bringing them into their homes. So I ask that you challenge yourself and really think about, is my home conducive for an older child? Because everyone thinks when they foster that they're going to get an infant and they're going to be so sweet and smell all good and that sort of thing. But you really want to make sure that you're considering getting out of your own comfort zone and bringing in older youth.
Excuse me, may I ask a question and add a comment as well?
Oh, go ahead, Jessica. Thank you for being here.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Did you want to go ahead and ask, or?
Oh yeah, I thought you said to hold on.
Oh no, please, yeah, go ahead.
Okay, going back to the young lady that was, I forgot her name. I think her name was Nicole, I think. About white families, the kids acting out because they may not know the flavor. I was a person who was in foster care and also dealt with the foster care on both ends of CPS. So I'm very familiar with what goes on the ins and outs. And I feel like they should add multicultural training for families, like, white families who bring in Black kids. Because I had an incident where I know a child they were not able to comb their hair I think they should definitely add like to where they have to have multicultural training for the opposite race, whatever whatever race they bring in their home, they should be liable to definitely be trained upon their culture. I also feel like one of the myths is that foster care families get psychological testing done on them, and I found out that they don't, and I feel like it's not fair because when a family gets reported into the system or a family gets a CPS case on them, they are liable. They are required to go and get psychological background testing, but yet the adoptive family does not have to get psychological testing background done on them. And there's been incidents where I don't know if you guys remember where the Caucasian family took in 6 black kids. There were about 5 black kids, I believe. They were all siblings, and because they have not had a psychological background done, this happened right here in Texas. The family took the kids over the cliff and killed all the kids. And I feel like that could have been prevented if they had psychological testing done on them, just as if the mother who was called CPS on had psychological testing done.
Well, you're absolutely right. And that case was also an example of the system failing to act because neighbors had reported suspected abuse. And because it was 2 white women who, seemed to know what they were doing, there was very little investigating done. And of course, the worst case scenario happened to those babies. But yeah,
exactly.
Jessica, you made a lot of amazing points.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, Jessica, to add to what you said, there is so much bias and racism in the world, but I think people forget that just since it's in the world, it's also within the foster care system. It's also within the courts, so people in the court will have more sympathy or overlook certain issues with white families than they do with Black families. And that's why we have to continue this advocacy work and continue these conversations because, these conversations, us just having, talking with a smaller group, we could at least then go and educate other people. The fact that you're hosting this, Tara, and felt as though you couldn't be a foster parent, it took this conversation for you to become aware. Like, we need more education. We need to be talking to each other. We need to figure out, what policy reform do we need to focus on? In every state, there needs to be cultural competency training. There has to be, because at the end of the day, it's not going to work out with a Black child going into a white family if they don't know how to properly care and respect for that child. Not only their feelings, their values, but their skin, how to care for their skin.
Because identity crisis is real. Identity crisis is real. And I have a son who got adopted by a white family. And mind you, I did everything they asked me to do on the list. But because I have mental illness, they told me, and then I was being treated for it, depression. And that's the only thing I had. And they took my child because of that and said I was not fit. I did everything they asked me to do. He adopted to a white family, and I'm just afraid for identity crisis for him because they don't know how to properly train and love on that child because they're not familiar with their culture. So how can you accept somebody and really truly love them and truly give them the instructions that they need to live if you don't understand them, if you don't really know how to properly love them, and give them the grace that they need to live, to be a child, to grow up healthy. Where is the best interest for the child in this case, where I feel they should have more Black families, like you said, and not to say that only Black people can raise, kids or that a white family can't, but if they have not been trained properly on their culture, again, that is something that can be a hindrance.
To Jessica's point, I did have another question. Nicole, earlier on, you made a good point about how we need to empower Black children to essentially advocate for themselves. How do we do that with children within the system?
So my organization, specifically, one thing that we do at Precious Dreams is we don't just donate items and leave. We sit down and we work directly with youth. And we have the conversations and we tell them what power they have. We tell them what they can do. And in every conversation, we're asking what help they need. We're asking if they're being treated well. Our priority is not the partnership with the organization that we're serving. Our priority is the kids. and making sure that we're empowering them. So we speak directly with them and make sure that they know their rights. So that's something that we do at Precious Dreams Foundation, speaking directly to them. But even as I'm listening to Jessica and we're having this conversation, I'm also just, my wheels are turning and I'm thinking, you know, we should even have that information available on our website so that when our young people go to the website, then they can see, you know, what steps they need to take or what things they can say and can't say. Because the resources and the information needs to be shared. And Erica, I know you could probably add to that what you guys are doing to advocate. I know you work with, I think it's mainly teens, but at any age you can be advocating for yourself.
Absolutely, thank you. And just like you, Nicole, we are very youth-centered and child-focused. One of our core values, our very first core value, is putting children first. And we make sure that every decision that we make, every policy that's put into place, every practice that we do is putting that child first. Approximately 40% of the youth enrolled in Friends of the Children have at some point experienced foster care. Many of them are children of parents who experience foster care themselves. And one thing that we definitely try to do is teach youth, just like you said, Nicole, to advocate for themselves. They can break the cycle of intergenerational poverty, of it's a number of things that we really want to make sure that our youth are prepared. And success looks different for everybody, and I want to be very clear about that. And so whatever the youth and their family define as success at the end of the day is really important to us. And we want to make sure that we're amplifying the youth voice and making sure that they feel comfortable and confident enough to advocate for themselves, and parents too.
Is it rare for organizations to do things like that?
You said, is it rare for an organization to do that? I would hope not. I would hope that that's common practice. However, in many cases, organizations make decisions on behalf of youth. And we actually we've taken on the approach, not about us, not for us, without us. And that ties back into our racial equity work that we're doing on a national level. So making sure that we are focused on the issues that we find important before we're making decisions that we think is important in pressing those upon someone else.
I just feel like maybe the system will look different if more kids were able to advocate on their own behalf, especially with Jessica being brave enough to share her story. I'm sure, you know, her son ideally wants to be with his mother. So yeah, but I was just curious about that because it seems rare that organizations would work on behalf of the children, unfortunately. But then again, I'm speaking from a place of just like not knowing that much about how the system functions. Just trying to make sure we don't have any questions. I do want to give people opportunities to ask questions. If you have any, feel free to put them in the chat. Make sure I didn't miss anything. Mary did make a point about how white families rehome adopted children of color at a much higher rate, thus re-traumatizing the children. Why does that tend to be the case?
Again, I believe, Mary can speak if she would like, but I believe that that's because people of color are experiencing their own trauma and really trying to navigate those different systems on their own, where our white counterparts are already ahead of us and have the ability to take in someone else into their home. But I would love to hear from Mary as well.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to jump in on this, but I think that's a really critical point. It was going to what Jessica, Nicole, and Erica have all been saying, that, you know, when a child is adopted, there is an opportunity throughout the child's life for that child to be rehomed if it's not working out, right? So you think of adoption as sort of this wonderful end result and beautiful sort of end story for a child. But what we find is that white families don't have either the cultural competency, emotional maturity, you name it, whatever the ego, the whatever it is that's involved to not only support a child who is a person of color, but also support the trauma of a child who has either been in the foster care system and isn't adopted or not. And so you see those children then being rehomed, which means essentially they just get put back into the child welfare system. And this can happen at any age. There's no sort of expiration date for this. You don't have like a 30-day money back guarantee or anything. It can happen whenever. And it is highly prevalent, unfortunately.
Jessica, I'm just looking at your comments and I'm making sure it wasn't anything you wanted to speak to outside of the chat. Yeah, but again, I want to leave space for anybody to ask questions if they have them. And then I want Nicole to talk about the 365 pledge.
Thank you. So it is National Foster Care Month. And something that we are asking our supporters to do is take the pledge 365. We are trying to do something that has never been done before. And it's going to make a lot of people feel uncomfortable, and a lot of people are not going to like it. But I believe that language is really important. And as Black people, we can shift the cultural narrative in how we want to be spoken of and how we choose to be labeled. And for 385 years, the term foster child has been used for anyone that is navigating the foster care system. And we strongly believe that that label is not necessary. A child is a child. A child is not their circumstances. And unfortunately, the label foster child is a label that never expires. So you go from being a foster child to then being a former foster child. And it's a label that you didn't ask for. And of course, with that label, people have their own preconceived notions of what the foster care system is and what that means. And they, can draw up their own assumptions of what your life may have been like or who you are based on that label. We are asking media, as well as all of our friends and supporters, to no longer use the term. If you need to address a child that is in foster care, you address them as a child, your daughter, your son, your cousin, whoever it is, and you can explain their circumstances. But I don't think people have realized how much harm that term has caused and how much trauma that term has caused. I learned very early when my sister joined my family how to speak of her, how to speak of her in a way that empowered her and made her feel included. And I watched so many people say, oh, this is my foster kid, this is my foster child, or someone said, this is my foster brother, in front of the child. And that does so much damage, and I don't think people recognize it. So if you want someone to be part of your family, treat them as family. And if it's necessary to explain their circumstances when it comes to advocacy work or policy reform, the things that we're talking about, then yes, absolutely explain their circumstances, but not everybody needs to know the circumstances. So we are asking people to no longer use the term. I can't tell you how many articles say, foster child chained to the bed, foster child abused, foster child, and it's a child at the end of the day. So we are starting with Disney and ABC News, and we're moving from them to every single media outlet and asking people to change the narrative around how we speak of children that are navigating the system so that we can use better words, so that we can empower them. We just launched a platform called yourvoice.colorofchange.org, and I'll put it in the chat, where you can upload a video. We're using these videos as we take meetings with all the CEOs of these media companies to explain why this term has been harmful. So we're working with people who have been in foster care and asking them to share their personal stories and how labels have harmed them, so that they can get the better picture. But we're also asking for our allies, people who have not been in foster care, to also make videos and explain why labels are harmful and unnecessary. So it's yourvoice.colorofchange.org.
I just put in the chat the Precious Dreams website, and information about that pledge is on the main page for anybody who wants to check that out. Chantel did want to know why someone would be upset with this initiative.
There are people who have found comfort in this term. There are parents who find comfort in this term. And I never want to speak badly of someone who might have good intention, but I mean, you see it on the internet. There are people who have created a full social following around being a foster parent, and they show every step of their child's day, and they're growing a following because of this title, this foster parent title, that has given them purpose. But they don't think about how that will ultimately affect the child who is now going to be raised with 100,000 people that know everything about their life, that know that they actually were not born into this family. So there are a lot of people who are proud to advocate as a foster, whatever it is. And I don't want to say that there's nothing wrong with being a part of a child's life that is in foster care, but you don't have to tell everybody their situation. You have to think of the child first. So that is where I know it will make some people feel uncomfortable. And then obviously media is going to have to do a lot of revising and editing to change some of these published articles that have gone out that are very harmful. Obviously there will need to be training in place to make sure that their editing teams and everyone that is involved is using more inclusive language. So that's why we're saying take the pledge 365. It takes 3 weeks to break a habit, but also it takes time for us to get used to changing our language. Even as someone who works in the system, there are times where I'll slip and say, okay, yeah, this foster parent or whatever. So I'm even learning myself, that if it's not necessary, then you don't need to always explain.
Erica, did you want to add anything to that?
I know, I think Nicole hit it on the head, but it's very informative, and I love your initiative. And as soon as we get off the call, I'm making the pledge as well.
I think you made a really important point. I'm not afraid to speak poorly of people. I really hate this culture of like YouTube families and their adopted kids. And I think that's something that's relatively new to me as a parent, because I had to learn that like my children exist outside of me, and I had to give them autonomy. And I would post my kids all day, every day. I'd be very expressive on social media about like very personal things I was dealing with my kids. And my oldest now is 10, and she's very self-possessed, and she is very intentional about what's shared about her. So I have to like ask permission before I share certain things on social media. I think there was a time where I was posting them every day, and that has since like stopped, because I can no longer post them without their permission, because them being exposed to, thousands of people that they don't know, that matters to them. And they have a really like broad worldview, and they don't want that many people seeing them or knowing about them. And foster children, I'm sorry, see, I'm even using the term myself because I have to unlearn and unpack, and it's a process. But all children, no matter where they're at, even, whatever stage they're at with growth and development, they should have control over what's being shared. They should have control over how much of their imagery is being shared on the internet. So Nicole, thank you so much for speaking to that. Thank you both, because I was just like really nervous to do this, because I'm just like not that informed about how the system functions. So yeah, I appreciate you both. I have to say Chantel was the one who was super enthusiastic about making sure that we had some sort of programming before the month's end. So I'm also very appreciative to her for telling me about both of your organizations, because I wouldn't have known otherwise. So Chantel, thank you so much for always keeping me educated and informed. And Erica,
Let me say this
thank you
publicly.
so much.
Nope, let me just interrupt all in your thing. I appreciate that. I received that. Let me just back up for a second. You are the perfect person to moderate this and to kind of help bring the conversation about, because so many people pretend that they know something. That's kind of what Clubhouse is, but we're not going to talk about that. So many people pretend that they know something. And I find when there's a moderator who is on a discovery, like the audience, there's more authenticity and there's a more genuineness in bringing forth the information. And so it's actually great that you didn't come on here like you do know everything. And it gave space for Nicole and for Erica to kill it the way that they did, and to expose some things and share some practical ways that we can help to debunk some of the myths, but also to speak truth and to be unafraid to speak truth into what's going on in the system. And so I am so glad that you did it. And I just wanted to say that to you. I say it all the time, but I want to say that publicly. And then I'll shut up after I say, I'm texting Mary on the side because, like you, Tara, I didn't know as much as I am learning now. And I'm very excited to go on the journey with Nicole and Erica, with Precious Dreams, and with Friends of the Children beyond this moment. If anyone knows anything about what we do at the Whitaker Group, we are very intentional, we are very strategic, and this is not some one and done random thing so that we can say, oh, we did something for foster care. That's not how we roll. We're gonna be in front of it next time. But this has been so informative, so eye-opening, so convicting, challenging in a good way, but not challenging in a way that pushes me away from the subject matter, but causes me to lean in even more. So I just wanted to say, on behalf of our whole team and the way Tara shared, I'm so appreciative, and I am freaking out. I'm so excited. And so just wanted to put that out there.
Yeah, I have so many notes. And yeah, I just appreciate you both so much for giving me things to take with me. Chantal, I have to ask about hugs too, or I'll be like, give me a kiss. And if they say no, I have to be like, okay, because I can't make you do anything you don't want to do. But it's rough, but it's so important for kids to be able to have control over the way adults are handling them and moving around them, because they're their own people in their own little universes. Nicole, Erica, is there anything else you wanted to share with us? You've already shared so much. Truly amazing. Like, I'm so grateful. You have no idea.
I just wanted to say thank you to you both for having us. And Chantel said two words, lean in. And it just made me think about, like, after this conversation, I hope we all lean in more to supporting our youth. The best way to serve someone is to ask them directly what they need. So I'm so happy that even Jessica joined us today, because, when I heard about this panel, I was like, we need to have somebody that was in foster care, because at Precious Dreams Foundation, we are always working directly with adults that were in the system. They know more than anybody the best practices, the biggest needs. So it's, if we're going to really serve, if we want to do better, if we're going to talk about, cultural training and things like that, we need to create platforms and make sure that we're bringing those people to the table so they can talk about their experiences and where we fell behind and what we can do to do better in the future. So I'm just grateful for this platform. I wanted to say thank you to Jessica for joining and using her voice today.
And I would like to reiterate the same. Thank you for everyone for sharing their experiences. But I challenge all of us to unlearn the stigmas around the system that we have all learned, but and relearn all the things that have been shared tonight in ways that we can advocate and support those experiencing those systems.
Jessica, did you have anything else you wanted to share with us? No, we might have lost her. I know she was driving. But
Harris County Youth Recollection. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Yeah. Okay. I used to work for Harris County Youth Recollection election, and we used to help try to change CPS and juvenile systems. And one of the reasons why I was hired was because I was in the system. And I was on a steering committee with judges and lawyers and CPS workers and all that, try to come up with different modules to help change the CPS and juvenile systems. And I'm very passionate about the work because I know the ins and outs. I've been on both ends. Like I said, I've been targeted because I was in CPS as well. So they feel like people who become parents in CPS are not fit parents or not fit to become parents because they say we have so much trauma, don't have family support and all this and that. And you are targeted. That's just one of the truths. Like it's one of the facts that it's been over and over and over. I met plenty of people in CPS who's been have CPS involved when they have kids because they feel like, you know, they've been in the system. And of course, there's a lot of different like, you know, stigmas that come along with it. And a lot of it is true. Unfortunately, like a lot of dysfunction comes from CPS because of the way we grew up, you know. That doesn't mean that you're not fit to be a mom, you know, especially when you take the steps that need to be done. But I just really want to get involved with the work. So I want to know, how can I get involved, advocating, whatever, you know, getting hired on, whatever, it doesn't matter. I want to advocate for change within the system.
Well, sorry, I was just going to say, I will make sure, I think the link was dropped a few times, but you can find my contact information on PreciousDreamsFoundation.org. I'm not sure what city, are you in Chicago? What city are you in?
I'm in Houston. Chantel Mack invited me to the meeting.
Oh, great. Okay. So we're launching in Houston soon. So I would love to connect with you. Okay. And Erica, can you provide the link again? Because I also just, being a part of this conversation and hearing all the work that you do, I want to see what other ways I can support you as well.
Thank you. Yes. And one thing I failed to mention earlier, that the youth that are in our program that are experiencing foster care, they actually leave the system 6 months before their counterparts. So I encourage you to tell people about Friends of the Children. My goal is for every child to have a friend or a professional mentor. That's a big goal, but I believe we can do it. And so definitely tell people about our organization because it's definitely making a big impact.
Oh, okay, Erica, I see you shared. Right, okay, great. So there is an option to save the chat if anyone wants to preserve any of this information. I have looked at both Precious Dreams and Friends of the Children's website. Very clear, very straightforward, very easy to navigate, great interface, both of you. So good. So yeah, if nobody else has anything they want to ask or share, I do want to be cognizant of everyone's time. I know Nicole has been traveling a lot. So again, I'm just so glad both you and Erica could be here and take the time to share so much of the work that you're doing. Oh, and I don't know if you guys follow us on Instagram, Be Social Please. We're going to be sharing information about Foster Care Awareness Week, or month, I apologize, for the duration of this week. So even after today, there's going to be more information and more resources and links to both of these organizations. So that's Be Social Please on Instagram. And then this conversation will be up on our social media channels and our website, correct, Chantal? Well, we document everything we do. So yeah, there's always a chance to revisit this amazing conversation. So yeah, if nobody has anything else, then we can wrap up. Thank you so much, everybody, for attending this evening. We so deeply appreciate you all. Jessica, thank you so much for coming and again, sharing so much. We really appreciate your transparency.
You're welcome.
All right, well, good night, everybody.